Welcome to the No More Dead Friends podcast. I am your host, James Evans. We are not affiliated with any 12-step fellowship. If you are interested in meetings, please seek out a local 12-step meeting in your area. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction and think that you might need treatment, please call 858-790-1937 to see what treatment options are available to you in your area. If you are having a medical emergency, please dial 911. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the No More Dead Friends podcast. I'm your host, James Evans. Here with me today is somebody whose story had a great impact on me. He's known for his story from going from prison to the Olympics, and he is the co-founder of PH Wellness, drug and alcohol rehab center in Riverside, California. Tony Hoffman, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, James? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, I'm doing great. I really appreciate Jacob putting this together. You're somebody whose story did have a great impact on me. So this is kind of a full circle moment for me. The last time I went to treatment was in August of 2016. And I was in residential treatment for 93 days. And somewhere along the line in there, Jacory, my case manager, he had put on your video of your story. I know you went to the Olympics in 2016, so it was something you must have done towards the end of the year there.
Yeah.
And Corey, he was somebody who got sober in prison, right? And then he was a case manager. Now he's the program director at Ranch Creek Recovery in Temecula, where I went. And his message for me was like, dude, you got to stop selling drugs. You got to get your life together. You're in rehab in Temecula. You're fine. You can do this. He's like, I've done it from prison. This dude right here has done it from prison. The possibilities are endless. And so I definitely carried your message with me for a long time through my recovery.
I'm always so grateful when somebody shares that with me, because a lot of what I've done is try to create these different streams of where my story goes to work, and originally it was just me on my speaking tours. And so a lot of people were affected by my story, and it was, an intimate connection for a short period of time. And then when the TED Talk became a thing, shortly after you started to hear about my story, now like these individuals that show up in my inbox or some type of connection like this happens, and they're like, dude, your story, had a big reason for me getting sober. Your story made me feel like I could do it too. And it became like a groundwork. Or the people that say, I listen to your story every week. It's like, it's just so crazy to me. You know what I mean? Because you don't do it so people say that.
For sure.
So you just hope somebody feels that little bit of spark that you felt. And then that feeling takes you to this place where you get sober, you find employment, you're helping other people, you feel purpose, you're happy, you're joyful, and all these things that truly matter in life. And then you share that with somebody else. And so to see that it was able to do that without me ever actually speaking with you, it means the world,
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, right? Because my recovery, everything happens just like everything in life, there's seasons and there's phases, and so it was one of those things in treatment that just helped peel the onion a little bit further. And then, I went to treatment out here in Temecula, and then I drove my fallen apart Honda Civic out to Colorado because I had a buddy's couch I could sleep on. And I was like, man, I should probably move into a sober living or something. So I moved into this halfway house, and in Colorado Springs, there's the Olympic training facility.
Olympic training.
So I'd pass by it sometime, and I'd be like, there's a reason why I'm in this halfway house. I'm making my bed. I'm doing my chore. There's a reason for it. Right. And it eventually
little reminders
here. Yeah. Those little reminders, man, it goes a long way. And, I don't do everything perfect these days. But I have my habits, and I do those things. I have my bullet point things of what I make sure I accomplish each day, whether it's, for my career, for work, for Restore, making sure I check those boxes, side things I do on my own. Like I got my little eBay store, right? It's a little humble thing. It's cool. But like I have my boxes I check, make sure I'm doing my things in this area of my life every day, making sure my recovery. And then my wife as well too. She's important to me. So I got to make sure I'm not ignoring her or pushing her off to the side. And sometimes that balance can kind of shift and I might end up too far in one direction. But I always, reset and then stay with balance for as long as I can. And, that's
Yeah.
what it's all about, and
Yeah. To me, I'm a perfectionist. So it doesn't matter what I do. I'm striving for perfection, but along the way in my journey of recovery, I've had to learn that it's not about perfection.
Yep.
It's about awareness.
Mm-hmm.
The
And
more aware
consistency.
the more aware of myself and others, people, places, and things that I become, the more effective I am in maintaining my balance for myself in recovery. And that's it. I need a baseline of balance. And
Exactly.
that's my place of happiness. That's my place of contentness. And that's my place knowing that what I did today is what needed to get done today. If I go way up, that's great, but I know that I can't stay up there. If I go down, I know that I won't stay there forever, so long as I'm aware of why I'm down there, what down there actually means. Can I grow from it? Am I just supposed to continue to do my baseline work until I come out of it? And then eventually I find myself back at baseline. And so it's like, I want to be perfect, but I'm not. I've just learned to be hyper aware
Yep.
of the context in the moment, the context of the moment that I'm in. And that context is really just an algorithm of how I respond to where I'm at in that moment. And I'm always just trying to achieve baseline. I don't
Yep.
actually even like being up here much because it's not real. You can't stay up there forever, right? These moments are when I can do above and exceedingly more than I can on a baseline day.
Yeah.
But I get those days a lot, right? And I don't get the days down. So it's like I just want to try and figure out a routine and level of consciousness that keeps me more baseline.
For sure. And what's always been important to me too is like when I do dip down and I do experience the ebbing and the ebb and flow of life, it's like when I am down here or things aren't falling my way or just whatever it may be, like I'm making sure that I'm still checking those boxes, doing the footwork to get me back to baseline and where I want to be. If I
Yeah,
just wallow in that stuff and shut down and isolate and don't reach out and don't do the things I'm supposed to do, who knows what's going to happen,
that's
right?
right.
So the having that consistency, right, is what's allowed me to get to where I am today and to continue to grow, right?
Yeah.
Like I started this podcast where I felt, I had the idea for this podcast probably about 2 years before I started this podcast because I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to be in person. I wanted X, Y, and Z. And then eventually I was just like, dude, I just got to do it, right? If I just do it, things are going to fall in line, right?
Yeah.
And I think even having you on here right now is the perfect example, right? Of if I wouldn't have started before I was ready, I wouldn't be having you on here today, right?
That's
And
right.
so, and
And
and then
eventually you'll have your studio and you'll
exactly.
have everything in person. I'm a firm believer of sometimes you don't get the provision that's designated for you until you start the journey that's also designated for you, because along the way you're going to learn what needs to be learned so that when you reach your moment, you're prepared to manage.
100%. 100%. And even if it doesn't happen, right? I mean, podcasts fall off all the time. This will serve its purpose, and it's like if this is as good as it gets, like I'm content today.
How did
And
that perspective change for you? Because you don't usually come to this openly aware perspective where you don't need to control everything and you're okay with outcomes, and then you just manage what's next after that. Was that something that clicked for you in treatment, or do you feel like you were stubborn through treatment to some degree, but open-minded and willing, and then you
So,
to a
so it
broader?
didn't really click in treatment. I would say it really clicked for me around 3 years is when it truly clicked. What clicked for me in treatment was after being stubborn for so long. And people talk about having multiple bottoms. I like describe it as I always felt like I was running into the same wall that I just couldn't get past trying it my way. So when I finally went to treatment this last time, it was like, dude, I just want something different and I don't care what it is, right? And that got me out of like the results expectation,
Yeah.
but I still had the reins for a long time. And
Yeah.
then somewhere around 3 years or so is when I'd say I truly let go of the reins. And like really, and part of that too was, with dating my wife, and like I was still kind of on the fence because it was still early recovery. I wasn't sure like how serious I wanted to be. And when I kind of like let go of the reins there, and she's like trying to move in and have me come this way and we're doing this, it was like, all right, like I'll just move forward with that. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the moment where I truly let go in all areas of my life and we just decided I'm not in the results business anymore. I'm just going to keep doing the footwork, showing up and doing the next indicated step and seeing where it takes me.
Yeah.
Right. And then
It's so much easier that way.
it was like a slingshot in my trajectory. Right. And I'm still not quite where I want to be. And I share all the time, like in meetings and stuff, right? It's not that I don't have goals and aspirations still, but I found a place where it's like, if this is as good as it gets, I'm content.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, the only thing I want to do is this. I want to plan for the future, but I want to react in the moment.
yep.
If I plan too far if I can plan in the future, right? And then I can stay there and then I can't react in the moment. And then the decisions that I make today aren't about today. They're about a moment that I haven't even reached. And so for me, it's about, okay, I'm going to make plans for the future, but I don't know if those plans are going to go that way. A lot of times they don't. I write stuff down on my yearly goal board, and most of them don't ever happen. I
Yeah.
have stuff that I've written down that I wanted to do and thought I was going to do that never even happened. But you know what? I don't even trip on it, because what I started doing was writing these things down. Those things were my process of moving forward and progressing. And then the moment told me where I actually needed to be. And I was just cool with the moment. Like that was honestly how I got to the Olympics. I blew my knee out in 2011. That ended my racing career. My racing dream in the Olympics was over, but my ability to say, okay, I can pivot from this moment. Something good will come from this. What's the work and the next indicated right thing from what feels like tragedy? And then I can take that pivot and I can work that and see if that doesn't give me the outcome that I wanted. And because I did that and reacted to the situation that was in front of me, that's how I got to the Olympics. I made it as a coach, not as an athlete. But had I decided within myself that the only way I could make it to the Olympics and the only outcome I was willing to accept in the Olympics was to be a racer, well, then in 2011, that would have been the end.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm okay with however I get there.
Yeah.
I'm okay with however life decides that the places and things that I need to be doing and going to, because my plans have never been as good as my higher powers.
For sure. That's it right there. Whatever, I know you call it God. I call it God for lack of a better term, because I don't feel the need to define it today. I'm so content with what I have. I just rock with it.
Yeah.
But whatever you call it, or anybody who's listening, whatever you call it, it always has it's always better than what you got going on planning in your head and how
Yeah.
you think you're trying to steer things and work things.
Yeah.
And really, on a smaller scale, that's what happened in my life with COVID. Right, here's this national or the global thing, right, that shuts everything down. I always sold artwork and decorated houses and did some cool stuff. And my wife worked in treatment. And with COVID, it's when I had to make that pivot from, the company I worked for shut down. I started working in treatment. And I just started doing monkey see, monkey do, right? Like I was running the same groups that was ran in treatment for me. I was showing your video to people. I was doing the TED talk because I couldn't find the original video. That was
Yeah.
one of the stories that I was showing people. And, life has just gotten so much better since then. And that was a pivot that I wouldn't have made if it wasn't for COVID. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think all the time, whether we lose a job, or a spouse leaves us, or whatever may happen, or even just getting sober, right? You're giving up that life that you're so used to for so long, and you have this fear of the unknown and what's to come. Once you do the footwork and you do the next indicated step and you end up in this new place, before you know it, you have a whole brand new life, and
Yeah.
it's completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have this analogy that I'll use, especially with people that are in early recovery, is that our starting point is in this village. We're going to go back to the village days, right? You're in this village, and you're not supposed to be in this village. But this village is comfortable because there's people there. There's food there. There's shelter there. But something inside of you knows that you're not supposed to be there. And the only way that you can get from where you're at to where you're supposed to be is to walk outside the gates of this village and go on a journey. And the only thing that you're allowed to take is this backpack with these tools that are inside this backpack. And you don't know how long you have to walk. You don't know what weather you're going to have to sustain, but something inside of you has to say, I can't go back to that village because that's not where I'm supposed to be. And so you do what you can with what you have, one day at a time. And then eventually you start walking, the sun is coming down, and you start hearing voices, these people.
Mm-hmm.
Then you start to notice that there's like a campfire. And then you walk up to this campfire, and there's people that are sitting around this campfire with food, with water, with tents, with all kinds of tools that you didn't have in this journey. And somebody sees you walking up and they say, hey, come on over here. We've been waiting for you. And
Yep.
you sit down, and this one person sits and they starts talking to you, and they start pouring into you these things that you need to know for your journey. And they end up saying, I've got to go the direction that you're going. I'm going to go with you for a little bit. And while you're with them, they're teaching you what they've learned by a person that taught them how to track their journey, how to trek their journey. And eventually that person says, okay, I've got to go this way. It's your turn. Now you got to go. And eventually you go to another campfire, and somebody starts walking up to that campfire, and those people look at you and they say, it's your turn.
Yep.
Go talk to them. And you walk up to them, grateful to see them, knowing that as beat up and down as they look, that what's about to happen to them if they continue the journey and listen to what you pour into their life, that they too will become somebody that leaves the campfire when they see somebody walking up, and they give them the tools that everybody else has given them. And that's what it is.
100%.
And that's what we're doing day in and day out. And sometimes things like COVID happen, and that's us having to change directions and go a different way. And then we find out when we get to the next campfire, I'm glad I left. I loved what was happening before, but what's happening now and where I'm at now and the people and places and things and what we're doing today is so much better. Still love where I was at, but where I'm at today is even better.
Night and day. That's a perfect analogy. I mean, especially if you've been sober for a little bit and have been around and can to where that really clicks, right?
Yeah.
If I would have heard that on week 3, it probably would have went way over my head.
You'd have been like, what the fuck are you talking about?
but like it really is. I mean, and on so many different levels of life and in the rooms and in all that stuff, right? And so, I appreciate the analogy because I'm getting to this point now in my own recovery, where like I've been sober for a little bit. I've had a good start, right? And so I see so many people come in and the lights come on and working in treatment, changing people's lives. And I'm on that phase of it where you're giving it away. And it's so many of like the reason why people are the way they are now clicks and is why I am the way I am to give it away. And that I appreciate that analogy. So really quick, I did want to take a couple minutes just to talk about PH Wellness.
Yeah.
When I first got in contact over there, Noble was who took me over there, and when I toured the facility, just the house up top was open and the gym was kind of small. Noble's passing is just, he's one of the many people who influenced the name of this show, right? It's the No More Dead Friends podcast. I know you've lost a lot of people along the way. I've lost a lot of people along the way. And in touring it these days, going up there with Jacob and Mike, I love the two of them, and getting to meet Matt, it's amazing and special what you guys have going on there with the two houses bumping, that huge gym in the middle. And then for me personally, I love Noble's house and that little nook you guys have set up for them. I think, or for him, I think it's just such a great honor to see.
Yeah, Noble came in at a very critical time. We were actually going to go out of business, and I was paying payroll out of my savings account. Like, it was, my employees don't know that. But we were literally putting our hearts and minds and every resource that we had into this vision that we could build something special. And when we started, we had what we thought was a very special property, and what Matt and I visioned for this place. We could see it, even though when you showed up, it would be very hard to see. We could show it to you and you'd be like, oh, yeah, okay. But like you said, you've seen them both now, and you've seen the landscaping difference, the difference in the gym and the rec center, and just the flow of how things are moving out there. That's what Matt and I had visioned, and we were working towards that. But we were struggling on the business development side to, develop relationships with other treatment centers that knew we even existed or could trust us, that we were giving quality care, and that IOPs could refer to us, and that we would get them back. That's a big problem in California, is people not getting them back or not providing quality treatment. And so when Noble came in, he really had a lot of connections with people that loved Noble. And if you're friends with Noble, you know why they loved him. He was a very unique dude, very charismatic. I loved his no worry attitude, because I prefer to stay in that space mentally, because I've got that really worry attitude. Matt's more of a worrier than me, my business partner. But Noble was like the equalizer, right? He was like, don't worry, guys, it's going to be all right. Don't worry. Don't worry, everything's going to end up working itself out, right? And so when Noble came in, he really helped us turn a corner. He really helped us develop some relationships with people that started to realize, hey, these guys are doing something different. And then we got to a place when we turned the corner where, as business owners, I think most people would have took that money and put it in their pocket first. And that's not what we wanted, right? We wanted to build something unique and something special. And so all of the profits in the beginning were going right back into the company. I mean, all of the upgrades that you've seen were mounds and mounds and mounds of money to make sure that what we were building was something that clients could come to and see that was unique. The clinical staff was truly invested in providing a higher level of care for people. And so, even me, every time I go there, every time I come back, because I'm in Dallas, I just love it, because day one was a little rough, bro. The lower house was like, we called it the trap house. Because the backyard was just like,
the backyard was a mess. When I first got there, the bottom house, the inside was set up ready for like licensure, but the outside was still, it was not touched yet,
No, and it wasn't for a while, because that kind of landscaping and doing everything that you see now with the brick walkways and the grass and the gazebo and the fire pit. I mean, it's
costs money.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money, right? And you've got payroll. You've got, at that time, I think we had 40 employees. And so, you got to take care of your employees first. And then you're trying to get yourself in a position where you have enough money that you can put all of that into the facility. And so it took a while. But today we've got something really great. We're getting ready to license another 6 beds right down the street. And really the goal is to build out 30 beds in the area. 30 beds in the area, and then the 4.5 acre property is campus. We've got like some garages that we can build out to create more of a clinical space. We got some garages that we could absolutely turn into a kitchen. And so all the food and stuff would be served at the campus. And then the individuals would go back home to their homes for sleep and obviously snacks and things like that. Or if they're in detox, they would stay at those locations. But we think we really have something cool.
Yeah, no, you guys definitely do. And I can see it, right? I could see it in the beginning because I saw the layout, and I know, and I just knew when I saw it, and especially knowing that you were attached to it, and then knowing about Matt and seeing the fitness element, and as small as the gym was in the beginning, that warehouse is massive. I could see the vision from the beginning, and it's really cool to be where you guys are at today to see it. and to know that this is a special place. And if I refer someone to this facility, they're going to a special place.
Yeah.
Something I try and convey to people when it comes to recovery is whatever it is for you that you latch onto, you have to have something that you latch onto that interests you, no matter how basic it is in the beginning. For me, it was simply recovery, right? Like I was always a drug addict. I love drug addicts. So for me, the fact that my people can get clean and sober and then live a fulfilling life and turn stuff around, that's what got me excited, right? So I just dove headfirst into meetings, and that's what carried me before I was able to like build hobbies and new cool things that were like stuff that kept me motivated to keep going in life, because we don't get sober just to do nothing. And so there's a lot of places with gyms, there's a lot of places where there's a little bit of a fitness element, but when it really comes to like, and like us, right? Like we got yoga instructors that come in. We got personal trainers personal trainer that comes in. She's actually an alumni of ours. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Her name's Ashley, dude. She kills it. We have that element, but you guys just do it on another level with that
Yeah.
massive gym, and the
Yeah.
focus is there, right? And so for a lot of guys and women, in the beginning, that's fitness is something that they can just latch onto, that will give them that sense of purpose, and the building I'm doing something with my day. If I don't accomplish anything today, at least I accomplished this, which is
Yeah.
so important in the beginning.
And we recognize that not everybody's going to get into fitness afterwards, but we also recognize the neurological or scientific benefits of the brain and body when it's actually exerting some type of effort, right? We have how to start your day in every room, and that's basically my life. Make your bed, brush your teeth, organize your stuff, right? And the other thing that we truly believe is you got to get your ass outside, and you got to get some sun, and you got to put in some effort physically. And that those two things, when you get outside, get some sun, and you get some physicality in your life, that the brain starts kicking over. It starts producing things that you need to feel energetic and feel positive about yourself, because we want them to latch onto something, and it's going to take some type of motivation. It's going to take some spark for them to want to get engaged in something. And so it's not always like what we say is about, adopting physical fitness as a cornerstone of your recovery, like it is for Matt and myself. But to keep you moving, get you moving, and possibly start getting your body and mind in a place where you're excited to go to meetings, where you're excited to be in group, you're excited to read a book, you're excited to talk to this person that's in recovery. Because like you said, all you had to do was latch on to meetings before you figured out all the other stuff that you wanted to do. And then you create a harmonic balance over time. And then now you know what works for you and what doesn't. And you're open-minded to changing things if something stops working.
Exactly. And it's so important, my one buddy, my real view and understanding of that aspect of recovery, and which is why it's so important for me to convey that message, is my one buddy, when he passed away. His name's Kyle Murphy, got his name tattooed on the back of my neck, and he's probably the sole inspiration for this, along with everybody else. But he was my best friend growing up, and he would always get so excited about like these music festivals or like certain things, right? There was always something that was 6 months from now that he'd be so excited about, that he'd always, if only I can just get to here and enjoy this thing, like I'm going to be happy. That was like one of his biggest hurdles, and the whole time that me and his wife and his family were trying to get him clean, I was trying to find something, no matter how small it was, to just click of like, if you stay sober and you just find something that works for you, and he just never found it, right? That's just the reality of it, sadly. But it's so important. And so when I see a place like PH Wellness that's doing something different like this, I can't help but want to support it, And like you said, it's not necessarily going to work for everybody, but for the people that it does work for, it 10 times better than anything else they're going to find.
Yeah, I will. I appreciate you, recognizing that. I mean, outside of that, the most important thing to us is clinical care and making sure that the staff our organization as a whole is on the same page. And I think that that's something that Matt Paz is really good at, is making sure that everybody understands our mission and everybody understands why we do what we do on a daily basis, and not because we're perfect, but because we care and we pride ourselves. I pride myself on those reviews. I look every single day, probably multiple times, James, for reviews.
Yeah.
And if somebody says something that was unfavorable in their experience, and so far we've had very few, we've 5 stars out of 70 some reviews, which is amazing. I'm on the phone. And I want to talk to leadership. I want to talk to Matt. What are we doing wrong? Do we need to do something different? Because the feedback that people give us are how we learn and grow as an organization to continue to provide care where people show up and feel like, yo, this place is different.
Yep.
It's not even the gym, right? The gym's a bonus.
For sure.
It's when you meet Miguel, it's when you meet Gabby, it's when you meet Kevin, it's when you meet Anthony and Angela and our staff that show up every day for these people. And working in treatment, like in treatment, every day is day one.
Yep.
Somebody's on their first 72 hours every single day. And that's a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a special person and it takes a culture to show up every single day and manage crisis and let that person know that we're here for you and we're going to get you we're going to get you over the hill. Because once we get you over the hill, we know that the spark, the light, the bulbs can go on and you can latch on to something.
Yeah, and building that culture is what's really important for me to see at the facilities that we choose to work with. Being the business development rep at Restore, that community and that culture at Restore is so important to us, that when I tour a place and I see it and I feel it, then I know, like, I don't have to second guess myself if I have somebody that needs to go.
You can see it and feel it right away.
Right away. I know in my first 5-10 minutes if this is a place I want to work with, or if I gotta wash my hands and take a shower after shaking hands with this rep. You can normally tell really, really quickly. But so shifting gears here, I wanted to kind of get into a little bit of your story, and get started on all that. I listened to the podcast, or not the podcast, the TED Talk earlier this week, just for a refresher. And what interests me kind of a lot, because I focus so much on myself, the mental aspect of the shift into addiction and then the shift out of addiction. And I grew up skateboarding. I had all my hooligan friends, we were all skaters, bikers, all that stuff, right? And so to see somebody who was achieving kind of the pinnacle of what we all had hoped to achieve when we were in that knucklehead era, right? What was it like, at a young age, being on the cover of the BMX magazine and kind of carrying the weight of being a biker? And then when did like that shift happen into addiction? Like, what was the mental process there?
Yeah. So a unique thing about me is I hated my sports gift.
Okay.
I didn't like that I was good at sports. That started somewhere around like 6th grade. I really started to resent myself for how good I was at sports, because I equated the extra attention that coaches were giving me, the higher expectations that coaches put on me, because they saw something unique and something special in me. As I felt like they were picking on me, right? Like, I just want to be a kid. I just want to have fun and play basketball at recess. Or if I don't want to play volleyball at recess and I want to go play basketball, I want to be able to do that. But coaches wanted to put me in this highly structured environment that could, take this potential and really sharpen the craft over time and create it into something that it really could be, which ended up being later when I was able to kind of embrace that mindset for myself. But by the time I was on the cover of a magazine, the BMX Racing magazine, I was a very arrogant person, self-absorbed, didn't really consider anybody else's thoughts, feelings. I just did and said whatever I wanted. And there was a part of that was good, right? Like, I would just speak my truth. But I've also learned sometimes not speaking my truth to save somebody else's feelings is okay to do, right? Like, I can hold on to my opinion and believe in it and stand on it without having to crush somebody else. just to do it. And that was who I was, though, when I was 18. And so I was miserable. I struggled with social anxiety, had a lot of suicidal ideation. By the time I was on the cover of the magazine, like I was struggling with depression really bad. Getting out of bed was probably the hardest thing I had to do in my day, because I tell people sleep was the first drug I ever took. And that was, if I was asleep, I could stop myself from feeling.
You were escaping.
I was escaping. And I was a late bloomer. I didn't want to use drugs. I didn't want to get involved in these things because I felt like I had a moral line within myself that wouldn't go there. So while the other kids were starting to smoke weed, starting to drink, I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. But I was also miserable on the inside, and sleep was the drug that I was taking, which was almost worse at that time because I was missing school. I was missing connection with people, friends, and community because I wouldn't get out of bed to go to the lake. I wouldn't get out of the bed to go snowboarding. Like I was just sleeping to avoid everything. And so when I stopped racing because I was going to move down to San Diego after I graduated high school to get involved in computers. I wanted to be a network administrator. And that was when the shift went from I'm somewhat okay because of racing. Like racing's my gift, athletics is my gift, and that kind of keeps my mental wellness from completely snapping over and me making decisions that are beyond my moral line. When I gave up the racing, then it was like I was stuck with myself. Like I didn't have any relief. I loved computers and networking, but I was always on computers and I was addicted to computers, and I was using that as a form of escapism. But it would always make me more miserable because I was never actually really connecting with people hidden in my room. And so I just started going to parties.
Yeah.
And when I got introduced to like the party culture, party scene, like all these kids were doing it. It was like, yeah, this is, I was smoking weed, but I hated it. It made me fucking paranoid, and just anxious as hell. And I was already an anxious person. But when I was introduced to Oxycontin, that was when I experienced a freedom, from self that I had never felt before. And it was almost like as soon as I felt Oxycontin, it was like, I want to buy that car right there because I see 200 on the dash and nothing else goes 200. So I'm buying this car because I want to do 200 miles an hour every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So the recipe for disaster was there before you ever picked up.
Oh, long before. It started like around fifth grade.
Yeah.
I really felt something was wrong with me around fifth grade.
Yeah. And I can relate to that. I know for myself there was a lot of stuff set up like that. So I get it. And I was an athlete too, and I didn't quite have that level of pressure. I was a 4-year varsity athlete, but the second I got hurt and I was already smoking weed, it was like, I was in shutdown mode. So, and that's where for me, like being an athlete, and coming from that background and then seeing where you were at, just wondering, how that transition happened, because it's so important. I think that like so much of us, like when we tell our story, we don't necessarily want to go through the drug-a-log and the drink-a-log or this and that. But so much of like what we're internalizing and what we were feeling is so important because the all the other stuff, the background and the this and the that, and there's so many elements that like really is interchangeable and it doesn't really matter, right?
Sure.
Like feelings and the emotions that are all the same in all of us before we really go down and nosedive into addiction. And when we come out of it too, I like to understand where people are at mentally with that. Because some people get sober in a Benz, some people get sober with a cardboard box, right? I've seen both of them, but we got to find those like similarities.
Yeah.
And then so from about the time you started getting into the partying, how long did it take before you did 2 prison stints, correct?
No, I went to jail once for 5 months and then prison for 23 and a half months. So 2 years.
Got it. And then so how quickly from the partying and stuff like that did you nosedive into homelessness and heading into that?
Started partying at 18. I was homeless by 23.
Okay, so 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. And when I say homeless, like it wasn't like I was living at my buddy's house. Yeah. Sometimes people tell me, oh yeah, I was homeless. I was like, what were you doing? Oh, I just lived at my buddy's apartment.
You
I'm
were
like,
couch surfing.
you're couch surfing, bro. And I did that too. But by 22, 22 and a half, almost 23 years old, I was walking the streets.
Yeah.
And now I'd find places to stay at times, and I'd get a hotel if I had money. If somebody gave me a place to stay and I had drugs to share and stuff like that, like I would get a place, but many nights and days just walking the streets, nowhere to go, find a dirt field to hide in, go sleep behind some dumpsters so people, couldn't, pick on me and do shit to me while I was doing that. But to a short period of time, man.
Yeah. And you were up by Clovis High School, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Fresno County and Clovis. Yeah.
Yep. I only know Clovis because the wrestling team, I think it's Clovis East or West or whatever. They always have one of the top wrestling.
Bro, you know what's funny about that real quick? So
Yeah.
Matt, my business partner, Matt Paz, he's a big wrestler guy. And I was like, bro, this country's best wrestlers come out of Clovis every year.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, they don't. No, they don't. Like these are the two places and they're over here and they're over here. And I was like, bro, go look up the top 20 for every weight class.
Yeah.
And almost every weight class, bro, from the little teeny guys up to the big guys, Clovis had somebody in the top 20. And he was like, oh, and I was like, bro, I don't know why, but ever since I was a kid, there were the Terrapelli family. And there's just a culture of wrestling at Fresno State when it was a collegiate sport before I think it came back now. But yeah, wrestling, bro, is like huge in Clovis.
In California, you have Clovis, you have Poway, and you have Temecula Valley. Those are the powerhouses of all of California. Is those three schools.
I spoke at this place called Del Barton School, which is a preparatory school. It costs like $60,000 a year for these kids to go there, and it's all boys. And I was telling them, where I come from. I come from Clovis. We're the ag capital of the world in Fresno County, but we're also in Clovis. We're like a really big sports community. And I was like, United States best wrestlers come out of our schools every year. And a guy came up to me afterwards and he goes, we are one of the best wrestling schools in the country. And you're right. We have wrestled you guys and you guys have incredible athletes every single year. And it was so cool because it's like, I'm not lying. Like, I know. I went there. Wrestling for some reason is a really big culture for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was a wrestler. So that's the only reason why I know.
Yeah. Otherwise I wouldn't know unless you went to Yosemite.
Yep. And then so you're 23 years old now and you're homeless. Now, at that point, how long in the homelessness did it take before you ended up getting locked up and going to prison?
Not long, 6 months.
6 months?
Because I was already on felony probation. So for me, it was a time bomb of when am I going to finally get arrested since I've been absconding? Because I just stopped showing up. To probation. I couldn't piss clean. So I wasn't going to willingly show up to probation and let them arrest me, And so it was 6 months and it was the right time because I was going to overdose or get killed. Like I was just really starting to go to neighborhoods and areas to get high and be around individuals that I didn't know. And that's when things like really start to get risky.
Yeah, that's the end of the road for sure.
Yeah, when they don't know you and you don't know them, you didn't grow up together, like there's no bond. They'll set you up. They'll give you hot shots. Like they don't give two pennies.
Nope.
About what happens to you. And I knew that. Like I'm like, dude, I shouldn't be here, but I needed to get high. Yeah. And 6 months of in and out of hotels or sleeping on the street when I didn't have money and. I came to an end. I broke into a house that was up for rent on January 21st, 2007, and woke up the next day and the cops were in there. Somebody had called and said there was a dead person. They thought I OD'd because I didn't respond to the person that was showing somebody the house to possibly rent it to him.
Got it.
They called the paramedics and said, we think somebody died. He's got needles around him. So when cops came in, they were expecting to find
a dead body.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was it. And then I was off to prison right after that. Felony probation was just a violation of probation. Sign the paperwork, you're going to prison.
Yeah. And then you got 3 years, 4 years?
4.5 years is what I was sentenced to. There was a huge mistake on my paperwork that I found out years after I got out. This is crazy, bro. I'm speaking in front of like 20 DAs. I'm telling my story because this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm building up this speaking thing, and I got an opportunity to share with a bunch of DAs from town, and the head of probation was also there. And used to tell this part of my story where I get arrested in that house. 30 days later, I'm in court, and I think I'm getting 10 years because I had a 10-year lid, which means I could have been given up to 10 years if I violated my felony probation. I'm out. Something they're giving me the max. This is a home invasion robbery with guns. They're not going to give me any kind of compassion, right?
Yeah.
Well, the lady says, I got a public defender this time. My parents are not helping. They're done. Wipe their hands clean of me. I show up. A public defender says, well, you get 672 days credit. And I'm like, how? I waived all my credits as part of my sentencing from 2005 for the robbery in which I was given this felony probation. And she goes, oh, no. Every day that you're on probation, you get a day credit towards a prison sentence or jail sentence. And she goes, it made sense because I'd been out for almost 2 years. Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. And I signed the paperwork. You're only going to do 18 months is what she said. And I was like, hell yeah, that's perfect. Let's do it. Well, I'm telling this story, right? And the probation lady stops me. And she was like, it doesn't work that way. And she was like, I've been here for 15 years. It's never been that way. And I was like, what do you mean? She goes, you don't get a good time credit for being on probation and not in jail. And I was like, well, I had 672 days credit. And she goes, would you write your name, date of birth down for me? She was like, I want to look into this. And I'm like, okay. She calls me 2 weeks later. I'm at Jimmy John's. I'll never forget this. And she was like, Mr. Hoffman, is this such and such of the probation department? And she goes, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm getting a sandwich. And she goes, you have somewhere you can sit down so we can talk? And I'm like, yeah. And so like I sit down and she says, I looked into your stuff. And she goes, you had 672 days credit. I think she thought that was like the Hollywood part.
Yeah.
Look into this. He's making this up. This isn't exactly what happened. She's like, you had 672 days credit. And she goes, the question I had was, where did those credits come from? Because you waived all your credits in sentencing and we don't give credits on probation. She goes, I had to look at your paper for 20 minutes. She goes, your entry date to rehab that you were sentenced to and the exit date of when you left that rehab, the dates were correct. The years were wrong.
Oh my God.
And I was like, what does that mean? And she goes, you got 2 years credit that you weren't supposed to have. And I was like, well, how long was I supposed to do in prison? And she goes, a little over 4 years. And I was like, are you going to arrest me? And she goes, you know what, Mr. Hoffman? She goes, you're off of parole. You're doing great work. I'm not going to rearrest you.
That's crazy.
Truth, bro. I was supposed to do over 4 years.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. To me, that's
exactly. No matter what you call it, that's God. You know?
Yeah. For me, I have that huge, crazy spiritual testimony that led me to my faith, and everything that I was doing in prison. Like, I was ready to get out of prison and hit the ground running and do what I'm doing today. Right. Like, when I got out of prison, the work that I do today, that groundwork was laid for 2 years when I was in prison. It wasn't the mentality that we go into treatment for the first time and we're like, I'll change when I get out. I'm not coming back. I don't need to do groups. I don't need to do therapy. Like, look, I'm done. Mm-hmm. But you don't realize it's the behaviors. It's that thinking that's why you're here in the first place. When I got to prison, it was like, I only have 2 years, which is not enough time.
No.
Try and figure out how to manage my life, make my bed, organize my stuff, become disciplined, prepare myself, mentally flush myself out, build this new state of mind, and get out ready to stay out, ready to go do this work. I felt like I didn't have enough time, but it was just enough time, because right around 2 years, I started feeling like I'm ready to go. And I feel like I was called to do the work that I've been doing, and that 4 years would have maybe hindered my belief that the visions and stuff that I was feeling would be able to get me where I'm at today.
Yeah. And let's kind of start off with that shift there, right? The shift out of the addiction. So I know that you had the spiritual experience, and then Did that start? Excuse me for not remembering exactly. Did it
Right.
start with reading the quote in the cell, or was
It
reading the
happened before
cell
January 21st, 2007. I end up in a church, and I had a testimony that was told to me by somebody that said, you're going to get 3 significant chances. If you don't stop doing what you do before these chances take place, you're going to go to prison. I get pulled over 3 times in 4 days a year later. And I remember thinking after the 3rd time, I was in a car with fake tags, no registration, no license. Driver didn't have insurance or anything on the car. And I had drugs on me. She had drugs on her. And the cop gave us a fix-it ticket. Let us drive the car off. Didn't ask if anybody was on parole or probation. And we were like right in front of Sin City, which is right by Fresno State. Really tough area, a lot of Bulldog gang members. And I remember thinking to myself, that was the 3 chances that Adam was talking about.
Yeah.
And I just been pulled over 3 times in 4 days. And 2 months later, I get invited to a church, January 21st, 2007. I go up in front of this pastor who lays his hands on me, says, God has favored me my whole life and everything that I've done, and that I don't have to worry anymore. He's going to remove me from my addiction. And I thought that what I was going to get was the miracle of not having to withdraw.
Yeah.
That's the removal I need, right? Like, just take away the withdrawals and I got this.
I'm going to have the easy way out. I'm not going to have to deal with my shit. He's going to wave the magic wand and I'm not going to.
And it's over. And that's not what it meant. What it meant was, I'm going to take you out of the environment that you can't get yourself out of.
Yep.
And I'm going to put you in a cell on Wasco's cell living yard, on D yard. And you're going to be on lockdown for 23 and a half hours a day for the first 90 days. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because 1, I couldn't leave, which means I could not self-destruct myself according to my thinking and my feelings. And number 2, I had to sit with my feelings so long that the storm actually passed.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself for the first time, I was like, holy shit. Like, I'm not anxious anymore. Like, I don't feel like I need to run and knock this wall down and yell at the cops. Like, because you know that anxiety that just takes us back to using. It's like we think that that's eternal. We think because we started feeling it when we were a teenager and we could never get rid of it into our 20s. And the first time we felt relief, that it's never going to leave. The reality is we've never given ourselves a chance as an adult with a developed mind, at least to the degree that the drugs have allowed it to develop, to process, to sit with the emotions, to feel that you can be uncomfortable for a period of time. And after a period of time, that discomfort will also leave. Being in a prison cell for 90 days was the first time I ever experienced that, because I never could sit with that feeling without making some type of impulsive decision. And so then it was the quote that I read, and then it's like, okay, I think I have the blueprint. Like, I need to start changing the way I think about things.
Yeah.
My thinking is the reason I'm here.
I that was another thing too. When I had first heard your story, that's funny. My old roommate had that quote tattooed across his stomach.
Hell yeah, I like him already.
my buddy Kyle, and he was just like a drinker partier, and he didn't really do drugs like I was, but he was my roommate, and I always would be fucked up smoking cigarettes, and I'd see that quote and just be a reminder, because that's what my habits and all that stuff had turned into, is who I was.
Yep.
And it was like one of those little reminders that was, it's not like it was intentional or whatever, but it's one of those things that I would see that would sit in my head, and I would really just analyze who I was and go, dude, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here? And it took a few years from that point, for me to end up getting sober. But so when I first heard your story and you shared that quote, it was when I just leaned in a little bit more and just listened a little bit more.
Yeah. I that was the first time I read something as a student of life. The spiritual experience in the beginning was not just surrender, it was humility. And that was the idea that a part of surrender, that is something greater than myself, may be in play of this whole thing, and that I need to give up my ways. It was also that I don't think I know anything. And if I don't know anything, then I better start listening and I better start paying attention. So when I read the quote, I didn't read the quote and go, oh, that's cool. Like, I read the quote and I stood in front of a mirror, so to speak. And I was like, read it to yourself, because this is about you. nobody else. It's not a cool quote. This quote is the definition and the blueprint of you, bro. And I just started to realize, oh man, like it's me.
Yep.
I'm the problem.
For those who are listening, can you recite the quote for those who are listening that may not know?
Yeah, sure. It's be careful what you think, because your thoughts become your words. Be careful what you say, because your words become your actions. Be careful what you do, because your actions become your habits. Be careful what you make a habit, because your habits become your character, and your character becomes your destiny.
There you go. And when you hear that at the right time in life, in a situation where we've both been at, if you look at it as a student of life, that gives you the blueprint right there.
It is.
For me, showing up to the rooms and getting the big blue book, I'm told my issue is in my mind, right? It centers in between my two ears, and what is going on right there? It's my thoughts, right? That's the start of all of that.
Yeah.
And how we build those habits and all that stuff is how we build who we are. And if we're not taking care of things between our ears at the very top, and whether you center it with prayer and meditation, or however you get that connection or get your connection, you have to treat it at its source, for it to work its way throughout all the other, and it takes time. It's not like you just, start thinking your way into better living, right? You have to take it step by step. You have to start with the thoughts, and you have to take the actions, and you have to build the habits. Those habits will build your character, and before you know it, life starts getting better.
And I think a big part of that is our ability to retrospectively look at the past under a new lens, right? When we drink and we use and we escape life through substances, we look at the past through a lens of victimization, through self-shaming and guilt and all of these heavy emotions that hold us back, right? And we take that lens and those feelings and those experiences, and then we create the story of condemnation. We create the story of self-limiting belief. I can't, I won't, and I'll never be able. But when we shift to this new perspective, and we understand that our old thinking is what was creating all of this, we put a new lens under it, and we retrospectively go back and we say, what was I doing wrong? Why did that not work out? What could have I done differently to change the outcome of this situation? How can I use my past to better manage my moment that I'm living in today, which creates a better outcome in my future? I met an atheist in an AA meeting, one of my favorite guys. His name was Warren. He passed away from cancer several years ago. Rest in peace to Warren. But he said, I have a disease of perspective. That was his. I have a disease of perspective.
Yeah.
This canon right here wants to come up with self-destructive, self-limiting, self-hatred, victimization mentalities. And that justifies me to go do the things that I do that are destructive to myself and others. Because if I can hold on to those beliefs, then I have the strong justification for me to go do what I do. But at some point, we have to be willing, like you said, you run yourself into the wall enough that you realize nothing I do is actually working.
Yep.
And you get to the same place that I got to through my spiritual experience, was humility. I don't know anything. So sometimes I tell people, what you need to do? Just shut the fuck up. If you just do that, and listen, the miracle will happen.
100%.
Just do that. And that was what I had to do. And that quote really gave me the idea. Okay. And that's why I can manage the moment the way I manage now.
Did that quote and how you managed to carry yourself in prison, did that allow you, because you were in a pretty tough situation in prison, right? Like, did that help you? Yeah. Did that help you carry yourself in prison in a manner that allowed you to stick to what was true to you versus ending up because a lot of people get in there, and whether it's fights or stabbings or just getting involved with gangs, whatever happens, they end up staying there longer, right? And things happen and they catch more charges, right? So did that quote really kind of set the tempo for you and how you were going to carry yourself and do what you need to do in there, but disassociate yourself enough to where you're staying in your lane. And I know I'm going to make it out of here.
Purpose is what did that for me.
Yeah.
The quote gave me the understanding of perspective and how I was supposed to use my thinking to build character. But my purpose is what gave me the strength to, I'm not going to do that. Now, the reality is I didn't just read that quote, have my spiritual experience. Now I have this faith and now I can just deny everything that's not good for me. No, I was cooking wine.
Like
I was cooking wine in Wasco's cell. I had a cellmate that taught me how to make wine out of apples, syrup packets, and water. We got drunk every week for 60 days. And then I went to a mainline prison and was going to be a winemaker because my family wasn't supporting me in any way. And you don't get a lot of food when you're in prison. It's just enough to barely get by. Well, I'm working out and stuff. And so I'm going to make wine and sell it. Next thing you know, I'm in 3 fights in the first month. And, more chaos is consuming me. And I'm starting to realize this is me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm creating this. These people don't hate me. These people aren't trying to get me off of this yard. My decisions, my behavior is creating the chaos to come to me. And then I made the decision, I'm done. If I say that I'm in here and I'm going to get out of here and I'm trying to write my parents and call my parents, please, trust me, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to do different. And I do believe that God's called me to these things, but I'm in here drinking and I'm in here getting in these fights, then I'm a hypocrite.
Yep.
I'm a liar. And the best thing that ever happened to me was the cops, after I got in these fights, my neighbor who I beat up was close with the cops. And they ended up moving me out of the building that I was in, and they put me in the gym right in front of the window of the cops. And I needed a new beginning.
Yeah.
And I had to go through those things to learn. That's why I always tell people relapse can be a part of recovery. So long as we retrospectively go back and say, what did I do wrong that I can change moving forward so this doesn't happen again? We shouldn't use relapse as recovery to justify relapsing. But I need to go through those situations to kind of cut more weight.
Yep.
It was holding me back.
I wouldn't have what I have today if I didn't experience a chunk of sobriety and then relapse because I just wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. I wouldn't have what I have today if it wasn't for that. But with that being said, I'm still super jealous of the people with decades of sobriety because I know a few who get to say, I've been sober since my first meeting. That's cool. That's super powerful, cool, and so we all have our own story, but it's like if you're somebody who's been in and out, in and out, in and out, when you get it, you're going to have a good story.
And a lot of lessons that are going to give you the reinforcements you need to not relapse in the ways that you have in the past, because it was a behavior or a thought pattern connected to that relapse, which is the ultimate reason that you relapsed. And so for me, it was purpose. I wanted to get out, and I believed that God was calling me to these things, not for myself, but for others. And the accountability to others really made me feel like I have to do this. Yeah. If I don't, think about if I didn't do what I was doing, then you would never have saw my story.
Yeah.
Think about that. Effect. When you saw that in 2016, imagine if in 2009, I neglected the calling that I was given, your story might be different right now. Mm-hmm. I think if my story truly had an impact on you, had you not heard my story, then you may not be sober today.
I probably would have moved out of the halfway house immediately when they told me I had to make my bed and do my chore every day. I'd have been like, dude, I don't need this.
Dude, I tell my because I do a lot of groups with the clients, and I tell them in 2015, I was going to quit speaking. I didn't speak one time. I believed that I didn't have what it took. I wasn't getting booked like I thought I should have been. And I was ready to toss in the towel and focus on my nonprofit and focus on BMX coaching, which I would have done fine in, right? But I tell every one of my clients during certain times, I was like, you guys have to understand this. You're here today because I didn't quit. That's it. I kept going. And because I kept going, the next year was the best year I'd ever had in speaking. And then my speaking career opened up the door for me to end up meeting people. One of them, Matt Paz, who came on my podcast, who is now my business partner. P is Paz, H is Hoffman. It's that moment, that very moment that seemed maybe insignificant to a lot of people, is why you're sitting in the seats today at this facility during this group with me. That one moment created this whole facility.
Yep.
Like, realize how big some of these moments that we think aren't significant, just the significance they have, is I could have thrown in the towel and I could have gave up. But I decided, do you know what? If I don't do this, James, you're never going to hear my story, and my story may not change your life.
Yeah, and that's good for me to hear that too, right? It's a little a reminder that a while back I read the How to Think and Grow Rich book, and the one lesson out of that book that I've carried with me, since I read it, is there's a line that says, "Don't quit 3 feet before the gold." Right? There's a story of somebody who was they were mining for gold, and somebody stopped in one area, and then a new miner came in, and they literally mined 3 more feet, and they hit gold. Right? And so the don't stop 3 feet before the gold. And there's times with, even like with restore, what we're trying to grow, what we're trying to build to, we might feel like we're not getting there fast enough, but it's like we have this mentality being slow to grow, and just as long as we keep doing the right thing, providing great treatment, keep impacting lives, it's going to happen, right? We don't need it to happen today. And so that reminder is something that I carry with me, because it's like, we don't know what's around the next corner. But if we keep taking that next indicated step, just keep doing what's in front of us, before you know it, it might happen, right? That miracle is going to happen.
Yeah. My way of what I learned was there was Pastor Franklin's wife would preach sometimes on Wednesday night services at this church I went to years ago. And something she said stuck with me, and I just have always used it. It's okay to want to quit, as long as you don't. That's it. And I've started to learn, and the more I try to put myself in proximity, and the great thing is with the internet today, I can put myself within proximity of these really great people: David Goggins, Andy Frisella, Alex Hermosi, Cody Sanchez, these really great individuals who have accomplished a lot, have faced a lot of adversity. You start to realize that these individuals all think very similarly. They tell you they wanted to quit so many times. Every year they have bouts of wanting to quit and throw in the towel. They just don't. Mm-hmm. And because they haven't, they have become victors in this process, because most people quit.
Yep.
Most people throw in the towel. The David Goggins story I love the most is that an ultra marathon runner was one of the first people to check out on the Navy SEAL training, and it was on a run. Because this guy was a runner, but he ran with the destination in mind. But running in Navy SEAL training didn't have a destination. It didn't have a timeline. You had to run until they told you to stop. What he couldn't do was mentally condition himself to run without knowing when to stop, because he needed a deadline. Oh, I can run for 24 hours. I can run for 12, but can you run for 16 and not know when it's going to happen in really bad conditions? He couldn't.
Yeah.
And the only reason David Goggins got to where he was at was because he wasn't willing to quit. Yeah. He felt the same shit everybody else did. We're all experiencing pressure, adversity, challenges at different times in our life. Like you said, seasons earlier. Sometimes we're in a season of harvest and growth, and other times we're in a season of pruning and being cut back, and things are taking from us. And we feel like, man, I don't know if I can manage anymore. Well, every time we're in one of those pruning phases, we all experience those doubts. We all experience thoughts of self-limitation and inadequacy. But it's the story after those thoughts that decide whether or not you're going to see the fruits of your labor show up, right? Because the one guy walked away 3 feet away from the goal he was looking for.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm definitely glad that you kept going, and you were able to have an impact on my life, and I'm glad that you were able to grow and accomplish and to do the things that you set out and said that you wanted to go do. So getting into kind of the second half there of your story, leaving prison, initially you wanted to ride in the Olympics, correct? Not
Yeah.
coach. So what did that kind of trajectory look like? Were you on your way to making it happen, or did it kind of would you say it was kind of out of reach before you got hurt, or what did it look like?
So it started to become out of reach when I got to the Olympic Training Center. And that was mainly because BMX racing tracks, when I raced, when I was on the cover of a magazine, were what you would typically see if you went to a BMX track in Southern California or Nebraska or Florida. They're very simple tracks. Everybody can get around them. But when you get to the Olympic level, they brought in this new style of racing called Supercross BMX, and it had a 3-story starting hill. It's like 30 some feet in the air. You're going 40 miles an hour at the bottom of this hill. And then the first jump's 40 feet long. And they've got these crazy turn gaps that like have no middles that are overturns and other people go under it. And that wasn't my style of racing. And I was older compared to everybody else. And, when you're younger, the frontal cortex of your brain's not developed. So 40-foot gap, yeah, let's send it. Who cares?
You're not scared.
Dude's next to us, 40 miles an hour. You're not thinking about leaving in a helicopter, or the guy that just crashed and left in an ambulance and punctured both of his lungs. And you know what I mean? Whereas I'm getting up there and I'm like, yo, this is not my jam.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing in me that wants to be up here. And so I started to shift my goals to, okay, I think I want to be top 3 on the American Pro Circuit, which is just the normal tracks. And I felt like that was actually possible because I started making main events with the best guys in the world. I thought that I was going to get somewhere in the top 3 the weekend that I blew my knee out. The guy that actually crashed me was the number 1 guy for the Olympics for the American team in 2012. So in terms of potential, I was there.
You were there.
Would I have done it on a BMX Supercross track? I may have been if I stuck around on those tracks long enough. But in my mind, it was out of reach. I think it was coming back a little bit too late. And I wasn't conditioned for that type of track. And I was okay with admitting that. But the dream of riding and becoming what I wanted to become was ended that weekend in October of 2011 in Orlando, Florida, when I blew my knee out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how long did it take you to pivot and switch gear and to start looking at coaching? Was that something that was even on your radar, or was it suggested by somebody else?
It was already on my radar. I was training myself at that point. And then I had a couple little prodigies, these young kids that I was like using as lab rats, taking the information that I was learning and finding the things that worked with me, using technology, which was new in the sport of BMX. And then when I blew my knee out, my mom had the conversation with me. I'm almost 29 years old. And she's like, son, like, you're living with mom and dad.
Yeah.
You're going to be 30 soon. You got to figure out how to make some money.
Yeah.
Like, Mom, I'm trying. Like, I've got this speaking thing going. Like, I'm going to start my nonprofit. Like, I'm trying to coach. Like, but nobody's paying me more than $50 a month. Like, I'm trying. And my mom's like, I understand, but you can't live here forever. And your father and I think that you need to start figuring this out. And things started to turn a corner like right around that time. By coaching, I started really getting some results with some of these kids. And so I started getting approached by higher level athletes. In fact, I had to pitch myself to a good friend of mine, Donnie Robinson, who was the bronze medalist for the 2008 Olympics. He was on this major downswing in his career and was being coached by a guy that was a great person, but didn't understand BMX coaching to the degree that he could make an athlete faster. He was actually making him slower. And so this is where I believe we have to be willing to do whatever it takes sometimes to prove our worth, where we know that we have a value. And I told Donnie, I was like, I'll train you for free. 6 months. Give me 6 months, bro. If in 6 months you're not better, you don't owe me $1. But if in 6 months you're better, you got to pay me for all of those 6 months, and you're going to pay me moving forward. And I was like, I promise you, I know what I'm doing. That's why I'm willing to do this. Yeah. And within 3 months, he was prepared for a race in Tampa Bay, and he made his first main event in like 1 or 2 years. And he took second place at a really big race in Rockford, Illinois. And when people saw that, it was like, okay, maybe Hoff knows what he's doing.
Amazing.
So then I started drawing in, athletes from all over the world. that were, hitting me up and wanted me to train. And it was really cool because when I started training Brooke, the girl I went to the Olympics with, I could be in the Netherlands and, I'd walk by people and they'd be like, oh, that's Brooke's coach. That's Brooke's coach.
Cool. Yeah.
Which is cool, And then like when I raced in Colombia years later, when I came back to try and win the world championships as a masters pro, a French guy came up to me and he said, I just want to shake your hand. And he's like, your story is an inspiration all over the world for our community of people, the BMXers, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, we hear all over the world about you, and to be here in the same place as you this weekend, to actually get to see you ride. He goes, I just want to shake your hand and let you know it's an honor. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I'm just a person, James. Like, I'm just, but that's what recovery does.
For sure.
It gives everybody that light, whether you know it or not. You're an inspiration to somebody when you get clean and sober.
No matter who you are and no matter where you are, right? Like there's this one guy, Josh Hill, who's he crawled out of the creek here in Temecula and got sober, right? Extremely bipolar, dealing with schizophrenia, all of it, right? He was one of those homeless dudes that was probably gonna, if he didn't get it, was gonna die out there. And he's got over 4 years now, and he doesn't have some impact on the world, but even for me, somebody who got to watch him change, he's such a huge impact on me. So it kind of doesn't really matter who you are, what, in the rooms or whatever, even the people who just before me would show up every Tuesday night to my men's meeting, right? And would share what they were going through in life. Those are the dudes that had such an impact on me. And they were just one of the pieces of the puzzles that helped me get to where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
And even for what I do, right? I have no clue on who I have an effect on, that the ripple effect reaches out and goes that way too. So no matter who we are, we're going to reach who we're going to reach. And it's so, so important that we do what we do and we show up and we share our message.
Because somebody's depending on us. 100%. Somebody's depending on you if you're listening. Your sobriety is going to change somebody's life, and they need you to change yours so they can change theirs.
Yep.
100%. I love that responsibility today.
Yeah.
I thrive on it. Sure. I know that's hard to feel and experience in early recovery, but it's the truth. Somebody's life today needs you to change so they can change theirs.
Mm-hmm. And even like with what I do with picking up the phones for Restore, right? So many people, I talk to so many people or families or whoever who are at ground zero and they're trying to get their loved one into treatment, or they're just like how I was aimlessly Googling places, trying to find a spot. And it's like, even if somebody's not a good fit for Restore, or they're not coming to us because of XYZ factor, going the extra mile, trying to help them find a place that's going to be good for them or get them the resources they need, whether it's state facilities or whatever, because it's like, it's my responsibility on being on this end of the phone to do anything and everything I can for that person, because it's that ground zero moment where they're at the fork in the road and they're going to go on their journey. Yeah.
And you know what? Your assistance may stop them from going to a place that's the absolute wrong place to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's better than them coming to a location at PH or at Restore, right? Is that they end up somewhere where they can be safe and get clean and sober. That's all that matters.
For sure. Super, super important.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone a little bit over. I really, really do appreciate you coming and doing this. I mean, I honestly, I would have never asked you to come on here. So I'm glad Jacob Alonso gave me that little push.
Yeah.
And he reached out and set this up. You really do have something special over there at PH Wellness. Jacob and Mike, I've known both of them for a long time with the facilities they were at before they moved on over to PH Wellness. And I've met the staff over there. They're all amazing. Really quick before we sign off, where can people find you and how can people get a hold of either yourself or PH Wellness and all that?
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok, Tony M. Hoffman. You can find PH Wellness at phwellness.com. There's phone numbers on there that will probably direct you to Jacob or Mike. But I'm also, if you like my views and things like that, I'm getting ready to really dive full in on content creation, speak more about recovery, treatment, personal development, and try and give people access to my brain. I always tell people, if you want what I have, all you got to do is learn how to think the way I think. And social media is a place that I'm going to try and be giving people my thoughts a little more, so you can understand how I've been able to do what I do, because I really just want people to have what I have. And if you're at a place that needs to be stabilized from addiction, we have PH Wellness for that. You have Restore for that. And so those are the locations you can find me. I have a podcast, One Choice, on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts app. Although I haven't recorded episodes, anything recently, there's like 100 episodes on there that go over a lot of mindset stuff and some of the war stories that can be entertaining. But James, I'm just so grateful. I'm glad that you shared what you shared with me and allowed me to be with you today to talk shop.
Yeah, right on, right back at you. Well, that's all the time we have tonight. Thank you once again, man. I really, really appreciate it. Like I said in the beginning, it's just a full circle moment for me and my recovery, and it's super cool to have you on.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the No More Dead Friends podcast. I'm your host, James Evans. We are not affiliated with any 12-step fellowship. If you are interested in meetings, please seek out a local 12-step meeting in your area. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction and think that you might need treatment, please call 858-790-1937 to see what treatment options are available to you in your area. If you are having a medical emergency, please dial 911. For information about our clothing line, please go to nomoredeadfriends.etsy.com. The No More Dead Friends podcast is made for educational, promotional, and entertainment purposes. It is essential to understand that the topics discussed in this podcast are based on general knowledge and are not to be considered as professional treatment advice. Please consult with qualified medical professionals before making any decisions or taking any actions based on the information in this podcast.